Welcome to our deep dive into the exciting world of wind energy in the EU. We'll be using a recent report from the European Commission's Joint Research Center, and you guys are in for a treat.
It really is quite fascinating.
We're going to uncover some surprising facts.
Yeah.
Like how the EU,
Shall
despite its limited landmass, boasts almost a third of the global wind energy workforce.
It's pretty amazing.
So get ready to discover how wind energy is performing both globally and within the EU.
Okay.
We'll explore cutting-edge tech, like floating wind farms.
Sounds good.
Examine the economic impact and the EU's place in this booming market.
It's a dynamic landscape, constantly evolving.
Definitely.
And this report goes beyond just the typical headlines.
Right.
It offers a nuanced look at both the challenges and opportunities
Okay.
facing wind energy in the EU.
All right, so let's start with the big picture.
Okay.
The global wind energy boom.
Yeah.
The report mentions that global capacity just hit a major milestone, 1 terawatt.
It did.
Can you even visualize how much energy that is?
It's mind-boggling, really.
Yeah.
Enough to power countless homes and businesses.
Wow.
What's remarkable is that in 2023 alone, over 117 gigawatts of new capacity was added globally.
Wow.
That's a clear indication that the world is taking renewable energy seriously.
And within this global surge, the EU is holding its own right.
Yeah, they are.
They're even being called a wind powerhouse,
Mm-hmm.
which initially surprised me.
It might seem unexpected,
Yeah.
but they've strategically harnessed their offshore resources,
Okay.
particularly in the North Sea,
Okay.
while China currently is in overall capacity.
Right.
The EU is a strong contender,
Okay.
especially in offshore wind.
So how much wind power is the EU actually generating?
Well, in 2023, they added a record 16 gigawatts,
Wow.
bringing their total capacity to a substantial 220 gigawatts.
Okay.
And it's not just one or two countries driving this growth either.
Oh,
19 EU nations contributed to this new capacity.
that's impressive. Germany seems to be leading the pack, though.
They've been at the forefront of wind energy for years,
Right. consistently
consistently investing in both onshore and offshore installations. Their commitment is paying off.
Yeah.
Wind now provides 17.5% of the EU's total electricity.
Wow.
And that's the highest wind power share of any continent.
I was particularly struck by the fact that Denmark gets a whopping 58% of its electricity from wind.
Yeah.
How did they manage to achieve such a high level of wind power integration?
Well, Denmark's success is a result of long-term vision and strategic planning.
Okay.
They didn't just throw up turbines.
Right.
They invested heavily in a robust grid infrastructure
Okay.
capable of handling the fluctuating nature of wind power.
Interesting.
Plus, they implemented policies that encouraged both individual homeowners and businesses to adopt wind energy.
So it sounds like a combination of infrastructure, incentives, and a supportive regulatory environment.
That's right.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the elephant in the room. Is wind power truly competitive with traditional fossil fuels?
Well,
This report seems to suggest it is.
the cost of wind energy has dropped dramatically in recent years.
Yeah?
Onshore wind costs have plummeted by 69% since 2010,
Ah.
reaching a global average of just 31 euro per megawatt hour.
Wow. So in many cases, it's actually cheaper to produce electricity from wind than from fossil fuels.
It can be, yes.
That's a game changer.
It really is.
And while offshore wind is still more expensive at 77 euros per megawatt hour,
Right.
it has distinct advantages.
It does.
The wind is far more consistent at sea, leading to more reliable energy generation.
Yeah, exactly.
Plus, offshore wind farms can be massive,
Yeah.
significantly boosting energy output.
Yeah, there are trade-offs.
So it's about weighing the costs and benefits for different geographical locations and energy needs.
Precisely.
But what about the economic impact beyond just the cost of electricity?
Sure.
Does the wind energy sector actually create jobs?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The EU wind sector is booming,
Yeah.
generating a turnover of 43 billion
Wow.
and adding 19 billion in value
Okay.
in 2022 alone.
That's huge.
And here's a statistic you might find surprising.
Okay.
It employs between 274,000 and 326,000 people.
Wait, almost a third of the entire global wind energy workforce is in the EU.
It is, yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I never would have guessed that.
It's a big number.
Where are all these jobs concentrated?
Well, it's not just about manufacturing turbines.
Huh.
The wind sector generates jobs across the entire supply chain. from installation and maintenance to research and development. This creates opportunities for a diverse range of skills and expertise across Europe.
That's fantastic news.
It is.
So we've established that the EU is a significant player in the global wind energy scene.
Definitely.
But how do they fare against powerhouses like China in terms of market share?
Well, while Chinese companies currently have a larger share of the global wind turbine market,
Okay.
European companies still hold a strong position within the EU itself. They supplied 88% of onshore
Okay.
and 100% of offshore turbines installed in the EU.
So they're dominant in their own backyard,
They are.
which makes sense.
It does.
But are they keeping pace with innovation, or are they falling behind?
Well, the EU remains at the forefront of wind energy research and development.
Okay.
Both public and private investment in this area is robust,
That's great.
demonstrating a commitment to pushing the boundaries of this technology. They are particularly active in the development of floating offshore wind.
That's encouraging to hear.
Yeah.
But I imagine there are challenges too, right?
Yeah, of course.
What are some of the hurdles the EU's wind energy sector is facing?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is the permitting process for new wind farms,
Oh, okay.
which can be incredibly slow and bureaucratic.
Really?
This red tape significantly hinders the expansion of wind energy capacity.
So essentially, bureaucratic hurdles are slowing down progress.
In some cases, yes.
Yeah. Can you give us a real-world example of how this permitting process has impacted a specific wind project?
Sure. Imagine a developer trying to build a new offshore wind farm in the Baltic Sea.
Okay.
They have secured funding, conducted environmental impact studies, and are ready to start construction.
Yeah.
But they find themselves stuck in a web of permitting procedures that can take years to navigate.
Wow.
This delay can increase costs, discourage investment,
Right.
and ultimately hinder the transition to renewable energy.
That's incredibly frustrating. It seems like streamlining this permitting process is crucial if the EU wants to fully realize its wind energy potential.
I think so.
Are there other challenges they're grappling with?
Another concern is the potential for supply chain bottlenecks,
Okay.
particularly for critical raw materials like rare earth elements,
Okay.
which are essential for wind turbine magnets.
I recall that China holds a dominant position in the production of these elements.
They do.
Isn't that a risk for the EU, relying so heavily on a single source for these vital materials?
It could be, yes.
Couldn't that leave them vulnerable?
You've hit on a crucial point.
Okay.
This dependence on a single source could expose the EU to potential price fluctuations or even disruptions in supply.
Right.
That's why the report emphasizes the need to diversify supply chains and find alternative solutions.
So it's not just about building more turbines, but about doing so in a way that is resilient and sustainable.
Exactly.
What are some strategies the EU is exploring to address this raw materials challenge?
One promising avenue is the concept of circularity,
Okay.
which involves moving away from the traditional linear take, make, dispose model
Okay.
and toward a more sustainable approach where materials are reused and recycled.
So rather than constantly extracting new resources, we're talking about creating a closed-loop system.
Precisely.
Okay.
This could involve designing wind turbines that are easier to disassemble and recycle,
Okay.
or even developing innovative materials that are less reliant on rare earth elements.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just about building more wind farms. It's about building them smarter and more sustainably.
That's the goal.
And this is where the EU is aiming to become a global leader.
They are.
The report highlights policy initiatives like the new Critical Raw Materials Act,
Right?
which seeks to secure sustainable sourcing for vital materials.
Yes.
This is all incredibly fascinating, and it's great to see the EU tackling these challenges head on.
I agree.
But what about the technology itself?
Okay.
What exciting new developments are on the horizon in the world of wind energy?
Well, one of the most promising areas is floating offshore wind, a relatively new technology that has the potential to revolutionize the industry, especially for countries with deeper coastlines.
I can picture these massive turbines just bobbing out there in the ocean.
Yeah,
It sounds futuristic.
it is pretty amazing.
How exactly does that work?
Well, instead of being fixed to the seabed like traditional offshore wind turbines, floating turbines are mounted on platforms, anchored to the ocean floor.
Right. This opens up vast new areas for development,
Right.
especially in regions like the Atlantic, where the water is too deep for conventional bottom-fixed turbines.
So it expands the possibilities for where we can harness wind energy.
Exactly.
Is the EU at the forefront of this floating wind technology?
They certainly are.
Okay.
The report mentions several pre-commercial floating wind farms already operating in EU waters.
Oh, wow.
And there are ambitious plans to scale up this technology significantly in the coming years.
This is all so exciting.
It is.
It paints a picture of an industry that's dynamic, innovative, and forward-thinking.
It does.
But before we get ahead of ourselves,
Okay.
let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture.
You mean the EU's overall push for renewable energy and their ambitious climate goals?
Exactly.
Okay. How does wind energy fit into their broader strategy?
Wind energy is a cornerstone of the EU's energy strategy.
Okay.
They've set ambitious targets for renewable energy, and wind is expected to play a key role in meeting those goals. So is the EU on track to achieve these ambitious targets?
That's a complex question.
Yeah.
The report highlights both progress and challenges.
Oh.
The record installations in 2023 are a positive sign,
Right.
but the pace of deployment needs to accelerate if they want to meet their 2030 goals.
Okay, so there's still much work to be done,
There is.
but it seems like wind energy will be a major player in Europe's energy future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a clean, cost-competitive energy source that creates jobs.
Right.
And with continued investment in research and innovation, wind energy has the potential to be a driving force in the transition to a more sustainable future for Europe and the world.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
from global trends to EU policies to the potential of floating wind farms.
Yes.
But we've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to explore, and the future of wind energy is brimming with possibilities.
We'll continue our deep dive into the EU's wind energy landscape after a short break.
Sounds good.
We'll be back to delve deeper into the policies and initiatives shaping the industry's future.
Okay.
Don't go anywhere.
All right.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing the EU's impressive progress in wind energy
Yeah.
and the challenges they face. It sounds like they're not just sitting back and hoping for the best.
Yeah,
They're actually taking proactive steps to accelerate the transition to wind power.
they are.
Can you give us some examples of these policies?
Sure.
What exactly are they doing to encourage the growth of wind energy?
One of the flagship initiatives is the EU's Net Zero Industry Act.
Okay.
This act focuses on strengthening domestic manufacturing
Okay.
of wind energy components.
So it's about bringing more of the wind energy supply chain back to Europe.
Exactly.
Why is that so important?
Well, it's about building a more resilient and self-sufficient industry.
Okay.
Relying too heavily on imports can make the EU vulnerable to external factors like supply chain disruptions or price fluctuations. By boosting domestic production,
Right.
they can gain more control over their energy future.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
It's not just about the economic benefits, it's about energy security as well.
it is.
What kind of targets does this Net Zero Industry Act set?
The act aims for the EU to be able to manufacture at least 40%
Okay.
of the components needed
Okay.
to meet its 2030 climate goals.
That's ambitious.
Yeah.
But it sends a clear signal
Yeah.
that the EU is committed to becoming a leader in the global wind energy market.
It does.
That's a significant commitment.
Yes.
And it ties in nicely with the issue of raw materials,
Right.
which we touched on earlier.
Yes,
The report also mentioned the EU's Critical Raw Materials Act, right?
it did.
Yeah.
This act is specifically designed to address the challenges of securing a sustainable supply of critical raw materials,
Okay.
including the rare earth elements needed for wind turbine magnets.
You mentioned earlier that the EU is heavily reliant on imports for these materials, particularly from China.
That's right.
So what exactly is this Critical Raw Materials Act doing to mitigate that risk?
It's a multi-pronged approach.
Go ahead.
The act promotes diversification of supply sources, encouraging partnerships with other countries
Okay.
that have reserves of these critical materials.
Oh, okay.
It also invests in research and innovation,
Right.
looking for ways to reduce reliance on these materials or even find alternatives.
So it's about having a backup plan
Yeah.
and exploring new possibilities.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like the EU is taking a proactive approach to avoid being caught off guard by potential shortages or disruptions in the future.
They are, yes.
And this act also emphasizes the importance of recycling and reusing these critical materials. The idea is to create a more circular economy within the wind sector.
Yes.
Reducing waste and maximizing the lifespan of valuable resources.
Exactly.
This whole concept of circularity in the wind sector is fascinating. It seems like it's not just an environmental imperative,
Right.
but also a smart economic strategy.
Right.
By embracing circularity, the EU can make its wind energy sector more sustainable,
Yeah.
resilient, and cost-effective.
Absolutely.
It's about creating a closed-loop system where resources are constantly being reused and recycled,
Yes.
minimizing waste and dependence on external sources.
Precisely.
It sounds like a win-win situation.
It does.
They can reduce their environmental impact while also strengthening their economic competitiveness.
Exactly.
And if they can successfully implement these policies and demonstrate the viability of a circular wind energy sector,
Yeah.
it could have a ripple effect across the global industry.
It could.
It's almost like they could set a new standard for how wind energy is developed and deployed around the world.
That's a possibility.
The EU's actions in this space are being watched closely by other countries.
They are.
Their success could inspire others to adopt similar policies and accelerate the global transition to a more sustainable energy future.
Exactly.
We've talked a lot about the EU's domestic policies and ambitions.
We have.
But what about their role on the global stage?
Sure.
Are they actively promoting wind energy beyond their own borders?
The EU is a strong advocate for renewable energy internationally.
Okay.
They're actively engaged in global climate negotiations, pushing for ambitious targets,
Okay.
and supporting developing countries in their transition to cleaner energy sources.
So they're not just focusing on their own backyard.
No.
They're trying to lead by example and encourage others to follow suit.
Exactly.
They recognize that climate change is a global challenge
Yeah.
that requires collective action.
It does.
And they see wind energy as a crucial part of the solution.
They do.
This all ties back to the bigger picture,
Right.
which is the EU's overall commitment to tackling climate change.
Mm-hmm.
They've set some pretty ambitious goals for themselves.
They have, yes.
The EU aims to become climate neutral by 2050.
That's right.
A challenging goal.
It is.
But they see it as essential for the well-being
Right.
of their citizens and the planet.
Yes.
And wind energy plays a significant role in achieving that goal.
It does.
It's a clean, renewable source of energy that can help reduce their reliance on fossil fuels and lower their carbon emissions.
Absolutely.
The EU's wind energy strategy is not just about building more wind farms.
Right.
It's about transforming their entire energy system
Right.
and creating a more sustainable future.
It is.
It's inspiring to see the level of commitment and innovation happening
It is.
in the EU's wind energy sector.
It's a very dynamic field.
But I know there must be some dissenting voices,
Of course.
some who argue that this rapid transition to renewables is too costly
Sure.
or disruptive.
Right.
How does the EU address those concerns?
Well, you're right. There are always going to be different perspectives and concerns
Mhm.
when you're talking about such a fundamental shift in how we produce and consume energy.
Right.
But the EU has consistently emphasized that the cost of inaction on climate change
Right.
far outweighs the cost of transitioning to renewable energy.
So it's about weighing the short-term costs
Yeah.
against the long-term benefits.
Exactly.
And the EU has conducted extensive studies and analyses
They have.
that demonstrate the economic viability of a clean energy transition.
They have.
They argue that investing in renewables will create new jobs, stimulate innovation,
Right.
and ultimately lead to a more prosperous and sustainable future.
Yes.
They're essentially saying that the economic benefits of going green
Yeah.
far outweigh the perceived costs of sticking with the status quo.
That's a key part of their message.
Okay.
And they're backing it up with concrete policies and investments
Right.
designed to make that vision a reality.
It's a compelling argument,
It is.
and it seems like they're putting their money where their mouth is.
They are.
But let's get back to the technology itself.
Okay.
We talked earlier about floating offshore wind,
Right.
which sounds incredibly innovative.
Yeah.
What are some of the other cutting-edge developments in wind energy technology that are catching your eye?
One area that's seeing a lot of progress is the development of larger and more efficient wind turbines.
Okay.
We're talking about turbines with rotor diameters
Okay.
exceeding 200 meters,
Wow.
capable of generating enough electricity to power thousands of homes.
Wow, those are some seriously massive turbines.
They are.
What's driving the push for these supersized machines?
Well, the bigger the rotor,
Yeah.
the more wind energy the turbine can capture,
Right.
leading to higher energy output.
Right.
And as technology advances, manufacturers are able to build these larger turbines while maintaining or even improving their efficiency.
So it's about maximizing the amount of energy we can harness from the wind.
It is.
What about advancements in the materials used to build these turbines?
Yeah.
Are there any new materials or manufacturing techniques on the horizon?
Well, there's a lot of exciting research happening in the field of materials science. For example, scientists are exploring the use of lighter and stronger composite materials that could reduce the weight of turbine blades, making them more efficient and easier to transport and install.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Lighter materials could also reduce stress on the turbine structure, potentially extending its lifespan.
Exactly.
And there are also efforts to develop more sustainable materials,
Right.
using recycled or bio-based components to reduce the environmental footprint of wind turbine manufacturing.
Absolutely.
It seems like every aspect of wind energy technology is constantly evolving and improving.
It's a very dynamic field.
Yeah.
And the pace of innovation is only accelerating
Right.
as the world recognizes the urgency of transitioning to a clean energy future.
This deep dive has been incredibly enlightening. We've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface
There's a lot more to explore.
of the EU's ambitious wind energy plans.
Yes.
Before we wrap things up, is there one key takeaway you'd like our listener to remember from this conversation?
Well, if there's one thing to take away from our deep dive, it's this. The EU's commitment to wind energy is not just about numbers and targets.
Right.
It's about a fundamental shift in how they envision their energy future. A future powered by clean, renewable sources like wind.
Yeah.
They are tackling challenges head on,
Right.
investing in innovation and creating a more sustainable path forward.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
And it's clear they're not just talking the talk.
No.
They're walking the walk.
Yeah.
The policies and initiatives we've discussed demonstrate a real commitment to making this vision a reality.
They do.
But what about the average person? How can they get involved in this wind energy revolution?
That's a great question. There are many ways to get involved. You can support policies that promote renewable energy,
Right.
invest in wind energy projects,
Okay.
or even consider installing solar panels or a small wind turbine on your own property, if you have the resources and space.
So there are options for people at every level,
There are.
from influencing policy to making changes in their own homes.
Exactly.
It's empowering to know that we can all play a part in this transition.
It is.
But before we wrap up, I have one final question for you.
Okay.
You've painted a very optimistic picture of the EU's wind energy journey.
I have.
Are there any potential pitfalls or challenges that could derail their progress?
Of course, there are always potential challenges.
Right.
We've already discussed some, like the permitting process and supply chain bottlenecks. But one additional factor to consider is public acceptance.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
You can have the best technology and policies in the world,
Right.
but if people are resistant to wind farms in their communities,
Yeah.
it can create a significant obstacle.
Exactly.
Addressing concerns about visual impact, noise, or potential effects on wildlife is crucial
It is.
for building public support.
Yeah.
The EU needs to engage with communities, address their concerns transparently, and ensure that the benefits of wind energy are shared equitably.
I agree.
So it's not just about technological advancements.
Yeah.
It's also about communication, collaboration, and building trust with community.
It is.
It seems like that's a crucial element that's often overlooked.
It can be.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive.
It has.
We've explored the complexities of the EU's wind energy landscape,
Yeah.
from the impressive progress they've made to the challenges they face,
Right.
the innovative technologies driving this growth, and the crucial role of public acceptance.
It's been a pleasure discussing this dynamic and evolving field with you.
Likewise.
The EU's journey in wind energy offers valuable lessons for other countries and regions
Absolutely.
looking to transition to a cleaner and more sustainable energy future.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And it's inspiring to see their commitment to tackling this global challenge head on. I hope our listener feels empowered and informed after this deep dive into the world of EU wind energy.
I hope so too.
As always, you can find links to the source material in the show notes if you'd like to explore this topic further.
And remember, the future of wind energy is not just something happening out there.
Right.
It's something we can all be a part of.
Thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive.